Hello everybody, today I'm going to read and comment on an article that I came across from the Huffington Post. And since it's from the Huffington Post, you know it must be unbiased and well researched. It's from a medical doctor, a neurologist named Altaf Sadi. Not sure if I pronounced her name correctly. And she wants you to know that the fact that she applied and was accepted into Ivy League schools, Ivy League medical schools, did not shield her from bigotry. Not sure why she even thought that it would, but we'll see. Recently, the wife of a prominent Boston businessman, one of my many wealthy white patients at Massachusetts General Hospital, she has to tell you that she's white, of course, reading me this way. So what foreign medical school did you go anyway? So, of course, from the get-go, she's going to be butthurt from being asked this question because she then tells us, for background, I'm a petite Middle Eastern young woman with a headscarf. And I'm guessing I do not resemble her vision of what a doctor should look like. That image is probably taller, whiter, male, and not Muslim. So see, this is the problem with these people. They think that they can all mind read. Never mind the fact that her name is a blaring Middle Eastern foreign one, and at least Middle Eastern people I've encountered in my institution are pretty much all recent incoming foreigners. And you see here that she even acknowledged that her parents are recent immigrants. So that wife of a prominent Boston businessman was not far off. In fact, this rich lady might be a bit stupid in thinking that somebody who is a resident in the #1 U.S. hospital will be able to get in there with a foreign degree, because companies and organizations do in fact care about the prestigiousness of your degrees. For example, the company my mother works in pretty much will only accept people from schools like Stanford or UC Berkeley. But still, this rich lady might have made a pretty good educated guess, because she might still have gone to a medical school from outside the U.S., Iran, let's say. Because for those who don't know, the educational system in the U.S. is a bit different than everywhere else. In that, if you're, let's say, pre-med, normally you still go to a normal university for 4 years after high school for your bachelor's. So in those 4 years, you declare a major that's obviously medical related, such as in my undergrad, it's normally MPB or neurology, physiology, and behavior. And you take all the general ed and basic courses with your major for about the first 2 years. Then you declare pre-med when you start to take upper division courses. Then after you graduate, you still get a Bachelor of Science, in this case. But then you will have to take the medical examination, as well as proving that your grades during your 4 years undergrad were good in order to get into a medical school, which is for another 4 years. This is apparently not the case outside of the US, in which you can immediately apply to a medical university after high school. Then you are trained specifically for that profession for about 5 or 6 years, depending on a variety of factors, before you then go into residency. So she could very well have been to a foreign medical school and then got into Harvard for a medical degree in the States. So anyways, she answers in perfect unaccented English. How does she know that she has absolutely no accent? Most people can't tell how good or bad their accents are. Not sure how old she is when her parents moved to the United States, but since she did not say that she was born here, most likely she's like me, and 1.5 generation immigrant. Which means that if her parents had come to the U.S. about 5 to 10 years later, she would definitely have had an accent, most likely for the rest of her life. But she pats herself on the back that her answer to this lady for the question is that she, in fact, trained at the Harvard Medical School. And then she said that her client's lips then remained pursed shut for the rest of their encounter. So there you go. You told this lady that her presumptions were wrong, and she probably felt ashamed that she was so wrong about you. You know, if I was in your shoes, I would have been whoop-de-doo, haha, in your face, bitch. But no, it's not enough that she totally stepped on this lady's shoes. She has to then whine about how much of a victim she was, and oh, how much she was how much she has suffered going around hitting everybody in their face that she was a recent immigrant who went to Harvard. Okay, so as a daughter of Iraqi and Iranian immigrants, such interactions unfortunately have been common for me. And my family members since we moved to America weeks before 9/11. When former President Bush declared war on Iraq the following year, for example, my sister and I heard classmates scream, "Go back to your country," from their pickup truck on our walk home from high school. So what? I lived in a black neighborhood when I first came to the US, and I was chased down the streets by a small group of black schoolmates threatening, "I'm gonna kill you Chinese." You know, my colleague, another Chinese, had to pull her son out of her school because he was bullied by these black kids on a daily basis for being Chinese. There was also this black dude in Oakland a few years ago who killed a Chinese father who tried to defend his son from being bullied. And then when they asked this black dude why he attacked them, he answered that he hates all Asians with their iPods and taking everybody's jobs. But hey, everybody knows that there's no such thing as racism among and between minorities. Only white people can be racist, of course. I thought that attending college and medical school at Yale and Harvard, respectively, would be my golden ticket, my golden ticket to America's meritocratic dream. That my prestigious diplomas would shield me from future experiences with racism and bigotry. Lady, you went to Harvard Medical School. That's not a place you could just step in and by putting your names in. She somehow thinks that going into Harvard is a precursor for meritocracy. No, it's the result of the meritocratic system. She's a foreigner, a recent immigrant, who chose to show off to everybody that she's a Muslim, and she still got into one of the most prestigious schools in the world and in the US. She didn't say when she got into Harvard, but most likely it's after 9/11. Well, I mean, I guess it is 9/11. Well, I don't know how old she was. Which proves that even further that she's in fact living in a meritocratic system. Which is the fact that she wasn't blocked from entering after an event which the propaganda that stemmed from it made Americans hate the Middle Eastern Muslims so much that they voted in favor of a war with a Middle Eastern Islamic country that had absolutely nothing to do whatsoever with 9/11. So despite all of that, she got into Harvard, went through Harvard, and got into the #1 hospital in the United States with her headscarf on. Oh, how discriminated she was. As a neurology medical resident in liberal Boston, well, that's your problem then, and working at a hospital ranked #1 by the US News and World Report, I also thought that I would be judged based on my medical acumen. Well, you were, that's how you got in. Not by the color of my skin or the scarf I wear on my head. But I was wrong. Yeah, I know. I'm surprised that you still have a job with all this discrimination that you've been through. You know, these people are throwing money at you for you to do your thing. Did they pay you less or something? Did they petition the hospital to throw you out? Nope. They just made some remarks based on how you dressed. Probably not even how you looked. Just the fact that you're pretty much holding a "I'm a Muslim" sign on your head all the frickin' time. I get commented sometimes for having a haircut. You stand out. That's the reason why they commented. Another time in a hospital, a male patient told me that his religion is superior to mine. And of course, she conveniently neglected what was actually said. This person might point out an aspect of Christianity that he thinks is better than Islam. I had people telling me all sorts of negative things about China growing up. I've learned since then that I shouldn't automatically assume that they must think Americans are better than Chinese people. This person might be genuinely interested in having a conversation, even if he's being condescending about it. You still have the power to correct any misconceptions you think he has had, and you never know. He might actually appreciate it. When I was listening to his lungs to help in the management of shortness of his breath, he added, "Why do you wear that thing on your head anyway?" Which is a good question, by the way. Despite his abrasive behavior, I politely informed him of his treatment plan and told him that I am praying for his speedy recovery. Well, good for you. That's what you should be doing, both as an adult and as a doctor. Another day, an 80-year-old patient with dementia began hitting on me with the head when I checked in on her for my daily visit. Pointing to my headscarf, she said, "I don't want someone with that taking care of me." Yeah, that's totally a good evidence for bigotry. You have an 80-year-old with serious mental problems spewing crazy shit at you. Why can these people learn some senses of humor? That's what they need, really. It's what I learned. I would have told this 80-year-old crazy lady, "Why? Are you allergic of cashmere or something?" Despite her mental condition, the racism still stung as I continued to strive to provide her with the best care possible. Is your race born with a headscarf attached to your head or something? My experiences are not isolated. A recent study in an American Journal of Bioethics found that 24% of Muslim physicians have experienced religious discrimination in the workplace. Okay, let's look at the source. Yeah, and of course, the study uses completely unbiased method of self-report. But even with this bullshit methodology, they only found 24% out of 41% response rate, which then came out of the Islamic Medical Association of North America members. Yeah, completely unbiased random population sample, of course. The election year has made it harder to be a Muslim in America. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump has advocated for registering Muslims inside the United States and banning those of us who reside abroad. Okay, citation needed, but still, Donald Trump must speak for all Americans. But I can still guarantee you that even if he wins, you won't be affected whatsoever as a medical doctor. Unfortunately, a majority of the Republican Party members agree with him. Well, this is why nobody takes Republicans seriously these days. And the number of hate crimes against Muslims have tripled in recent weeks. I didn't find anything in this article searching hate crime. I did find that a bit more than half of the show that more than 7 in 10 adults. So, well, the poll shows that more than 7 in 10 adults think Muslims in the United States face discrimination, and 60% of Americans say Trump proposal on Muslims who are not U.S. citizens is the wrong thing to do. And I also found that a 73% majority in a poll say Muslims living in the United States experience discrimination because of their religion, and vast majority says it's not justified. And here, a 54% majority of Americans say mainstream Islam, excluding fringe elements and extremists, is a peaceful religion. So, again, she conveniently neglected those. Yet, I also recognize that Muslims are just America's newest, quote, outsiders. Throughout our history, Catholics, Irish, Italians, women, African Americans, Jews, Latinos, and gays have all been targets of nativist fear-mongering. You know, there's never any mentionings of Asians or atheists in these lists, of course, because everybody knows that we Asians, including non-Muslim Indians, never face discriminations in our lives because we got the white privilege from being whitewashed. That's why. It has nothing to do with the fact that we tend to shut up and work hard and just ignore these trivial things, despite the fact that there are laws in place that disadvantages us, such as affirmative action. But instead of writing an article on Huffington's Post to whine about it, our parents say to us, oh, you have to score 400 points higher than blacks on the SAT to get into the same schools? Well, then just score 400 points higher. And you wonder why Asians are taking everybody's jobs in STEM fields, and why you will never encounter an article that will say how they are discriminated against in workplaces. I'm just going to give you the example of my mother, who I have quite a lot of respect for, when it comes to her career. You know, we disagree passionately on other stuff, but when it comes to what she went through working in the US, she really deserves all the praises that she gets. So she works in this company, which as I have said, will only accept people from Stanford or UC Berkeley or similar schools. She got her degree in China in a school that's not even considered to be the top in China. She did get a professorship in one of the best schools in China, but she got into this company because she was lucky to be employed in a time when the economy was booming, and she worked at UC Berkeley briefly because my father was employed there, so she managed to get a job as well. In a lot of these schools, that's how it works. So if they really want you, they will find something for your spouse as well. Now, she speaks very poor English, but she works very hard, and she gained a lot of experience, which gave her basic communication skills for technical stuff, which apparently was good enough to eventually land her a job as a performance engineer in customer service. Now, every time if the topic of her job is brought up, she complains about how poor her English skill was, and how envious she was of other people who can speak English so well. And it's true. I mean, I showed people the texts that my mother sent to me in English, and they're just downright hilarious. And still, she was eventually promoted to principal engineer with quite a large income, large enough to balance out her, despite for her job, one that she has a clear disadvantage of, and she pretty much hates because she likes this Iranian American Muslim doctor has to deal with quite a lot of rude customers, the rudest of which are not even cisgendered white males, but Indians, due to the heavy competitive nature between the Asian minorities. She succeeded because of her attitude to examine, yourself first and foremost, instead of immediately blaming any of your failures on other people, or having this "God, this country is so racist, woe is me," being a non-white vibe that this doctor seems to carry with her all the freaking time. But yeah, meritocracy doesn't exist for minorities, only bigotry. Many of these groups still face prejudice today, and hospitals are not immune from such discrimination, whether implicit or explicit. I know everybody except whites face significant prejudice. You know, I lived down here in the South, and people thought that I was a recent incoming foreigner all the fucking time. You know, I was asked numerous times whether I understood English, and one time I had to repeat that I was a citizen to people who didn't even believe that I understood English enough to know what it meant, even when I showed them my citizenship passport card. There was even this one time a guy thought that I was adopted by a white dude, my housemate's father, who came over, when I told him that, no, I'm not a foreign exchange student. You know, I just laughed it off. I make a joke about how that guy seems to have never seen an Asian American in his life or something. Why is this woman being so defensively immature? God. When I was a third-year medical student, it appeared to me that the pediatric residents that attending physicians would spend extra time caring for the white infants and children during morning rounds. The 2 African American babies and 1 Arab infant admitted to the inpatient pediatric service at the time were never oohed and ahhed, and received noticeably less attention. Of course, she's not using any selective attention bias whatsoever here. Have you noticed that only white children are called cute? I asked my friend after our 3rd day on the pediatric rotation. I actually heard all my white friends say that the cutest children are Asians, and the Asians say that the most beautiful children are Middle Easterners. My friend, an African American medical student, of course, only white means not black, had his own grievance. He had overheard a doctor referred to an African American father as an angry black man. Maybe he was. Why is this racist? The fact that the word black was said? So what if this doctor has said angry Asian man? No one would bat an eye, of course. I don't understand, my friend said. His daughter is dying. He is upset and has questions. He's not asking any more questions than the other parents. So he was in fact angry. The problem was, in fact, the doctor put angry and black together in the same sentence. Ooh, that doctor is gonna get it now. Our observation were also not isolated incidents. Multiple peer-reviewed studies have shown that physicians unconsciously prefer to spend more time with white patients than African American ones. I checked on this link. I couldn't find such a claim. In fact, the article says here that there is no direct evidence that provider biases affect the quality of care for minority patients. Research suggests that healthcare providers' diagnostic and treatment decisions, as well as their feelings about patients, are influenced by patients' race or ethnicity. Okay, so no direct evidence, it's just, again, feelings, of course. I also recall the occasional episode of the overt racism in hospital. One surgeon, prominent and stern in his crisp white coat, said the following about a Hispanic patient who was coming to have her melanoma examined for excision. I can't believe these people. They have been here for a decade, can't bother to learn English, and we're stuck waiting for an interpreter. Yeah, because it's totally the white people's fault when you've been here for a decade and still need an interpreter when you go see the doctor. You know, there's this Chinese couple who were both in the institution where I currently work. They both struggled with English. So much that once my advisor walked in on them and told them that they should speak to each other in English, husband and wife, instead of Chinese. Boy, could he have gotten into so much trouble if that couple was Hispanic. You know, I go to a foreign country in Europe and I'm always embarrassed that I don't speak the majority language of that country, even if I'm just there for a week for a conference that's in English. You know, if you show humility, as you should be showing humility, and you're apologetic at the fact that you are, in fact, being an inconvenience to the people there by not speaking their language, they're usually nicer to you. You know, when I was in Spain, people help me and they try to speak whatever English they can when I tell them how sorry I am that I don't speak Spanish. In Italy, when I did that, there are actually people who apologized to me in return for not speaking English. But if you're being an asshole with this entitled attitude that you don't need to pick up the language after being there for a decade, and that you are entitled to interpreter instead, you deserve being called on. And trust me when I say this, learning English from Spanish as a native language is nowhere near as challenging as learning English from Chinese as a native language. Which is why, despite my mother's efforts, she still sucks at it. But she still holds herself responsible for that. She never in her life feels that she's entitled to an interpreter when she goes to see the doctor. If she really runs into trouble with a language issue, she would just go look for a Chinese doctor or a Chinese hospital instead of wasting other people's time by making them wait for an interpreter. But the episodes of implicit racism have been more commonplace. Yes, keyword right there, implicit racism. AKA racism that you can't prove, just how you feel about it. Most episodes have gone unchallenged by my colleagues and me. Medical students and residents who have rarely felt empowered enough to speak up against older and usually wider established faculty members and physicians. Yeah, you can't stand up for yourself. It must be white people's fault. Some hospitals and medical schools have attempted to address these problems by creating a diverse physician population that will hopefully someday reflect the ethnic, religious, and racial makeup of our patients. Wow. Yeah, apparently she can't see how that's actually racism institutionalized. And of course, she's full on agreement with this. However, this is not enough. Of course not. White people must be banned from hospitals. At the same time, we as physicians and societies more generally must realize that the struggles of one marginalized community are struggles of all of us. Yes, because white people never struggles with or being mistreated by minorities. My fight as a Muslim American doctor to serve my patients without fear of racism, and the fight of an African American patient to be treated with dignity and respect should also be your fights. No thank you, I care about individuals, not skin color or what people wear on their heads. Our national conversation needs to be less disjointed. It is not about Tamir Rice or Eric Garner 1 minute and Donald Trump comments about Muslims or Latinos next minute. You know, honestly, I know I'm going to sound terrible for saying this, but what this woman really needs is what I've been through, which is unsheltered criticism thrown at her constantly regarding her race, ethnicity, or religion. Because then she may finally get desensitized by them and start to look within instead of without. Chinese people never had such powerful political left-wingers at their backs in every step of the way, and I think that's how we know how to hold ourselves and recognize and change our behaviors that are flawed. I understand where she comes from all of this. It's a product of being groomed by a traditional in-group culture, which fosters this sheltered pride, which resolves in defensiveness when challenged. I used to be like her. I was also this of a sensitive person, and I used to be really upset when people say shit about China or the Chinese. But the difference was when I complained like a bitch, no one fucking cared. The teachers didn't know what to do about it even. Because Asians are not a politically protected group. I mean, Japanese concentration camps in World War II. Yeah, let's all forget about that, right? Nobody ever discriminated against Asians. But now when I think back, I realize how immature I was. And that the right thing to do was really think about these criticisms and trying to see things in a different perspective. Then I'm able to communicate these perspectives to other people, anybody who is interested and willing to listen. And I also learned many things from them in return. That's what this woman needs to do. She needs to get the fuck out of her little personal tight bubble, woman up, and face criticisms with the right attitude, reason, and skepticism. For example, she goes on and on about how she's been persecuted for being a Muslim. Now, I wonder how many of these similar instances I would encounter if I were to wear a huge sign on my head that says, "I'm an atheist," or "I believe there is in fact no God." You chose to show off what you are. People are going to ask. This is the same anywhere, lady. You're in fact privileged. You got into Harvard, you got a good job, and you're probably filthy rich. But apparently that's not enough for you. Okay, let's keep going. Almost there. In medicine, I find it is often easier to look outside at global or national health disparities, for instance, rather than look within our own communities, in our own hospitals. These disparities hurt patients and doctors too. Personally, when I'm confronted with bigotry on the job, I figure out ways to ignore it, which is what you should do. Reminding myself how scared patients must be in a state of sickness and vulnerability in the hospital. However, I also wish there was more conversation about it among physicians because it is hard to deal with prejudice on a continual basis, and it only adds to the stress of our inherently rigorous training and profession. Yeah. More whinery. Yeah, because only if the conversation goes your way. I mean, you would probably call me a racist. I wouldn't be surprised. SJWs usually do. And since I'm not a protected class, you know how that shit will go down. Overall, it's about understanding that these challenges, global and local, are interconnected, and we will only be able to properly address the harmful prejudice in the medical profession and throughout the United States when we will come together and acknowledge each other's pain and America's pain history. Yeah, only America's pain history. I don't know why her parents moved to the US, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's fleeing from the Islamic Revolution or some form of persecution. I mean, her parents apparently Iranians and Iraqis. Well, at the very least, her parents are definitely economic migrants. She feels entitled to complain to a country that essentially made her life so much better than it could have been had her parents stayed in Iran or Iraq or wherever. That's another problem with these people. They don't understand how to be grateful, being accepted into a country with a drastic different culture than their own. I mean, can she say the same thing about Iran, I wonder? But who cares about that? Only America's history should be acknowledged as being fucked up. Anyways, that's the end of the article, and there are some comments below. Most of her supporters brings up diversity. This is also something I want to touch upon briefly. Diversity should also mean diversity of criticisms. Just imagine food, for example. I enjoy Chinese food, but there will be people who don't like it. So they will say, oh, Chinese food is so oily and so wet, whereas I have the opposite problem for Western food, which is that they're so raw and dry. We tell each other this and we disagree. That's diversity. But no, what I should do instead is to tell these people that they are in fact tastists and their Western food is oppressing Chinese food. And diversity means that everybody has to respect my taste in food. And if they don't and they say such, they are persecuting me. This is what she's doing here. And the sad thing is that with this left-wing politics behind her, she can afford to. She feels entitled to. She's surrounded by people who have to tippy-toe around her sensibilities. Anyways, that's my video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please make comments or questions below and subscribe if you like it. Well, until next time.